time you get a little older, you're not quite as mobile as you used to be. And Sister Hudson and I both reached that point in life where I think the warranty has run out. Now the parts are going bad. So maybe you don't move quite like I used to in my younger days. It is a pleasure to be here this morning, and I do want to say we had planned to have a little slide presentation, and we want to say thank you for your endeavors, or your support of our endeavors in Myanmar. And I do want to say something about that before the service is over, but I really feel like now it's probably more appropriate to go into the Word of the Lord. And it is a pleasure to be here with Brother Randolph and his wife. We have wanted to get by for some time now. In fact, I told Sister Hudson right after Brother Randolph took the church here, I said I'm going to slip in on him and just to let him know that we're for him. And but it hasn't happened. We stayed rather busy, and but here we are today, and it's so good to see all of you, so many of our friends, and it's hard to come in here without so many memories flooding our mind of the younger days. And yes, the days when Brother Mika was younger, and was younger, and I even remember the days before Timothy. I remember he was expecting me to say something, so I had to say that. Amen. I did want to make mention of something, though, and I'm not telling the pastor what to do, but I think he needs to kind of keep an eye on some of these musicians. I think some of them are listening to their iPod in service this morning. I looked over there at that drummer, and he looked like he was listening to his iPod. Somebody said something about a basketball game. So I know what I'm preaching on this morning. It's good to be with you, and appreciate the Spirit of the Lord that we feel. And it's good to have Sister Hudson here too, and maybe she'll say something in a little while. I've been in Charlotte all this week, and I'm actually now working on my second doctorate, which I hope is going to help us in Myanmar. But we came in yesterday afternoon after finishing up class, and I was having some issues. I was sick, not feeling well, so I went to bed a little early last night. And all during the night I was praying, Lord, I'd like to be a help here today. And, a lot of things I could say, but I would really like to know what God has to say. And I do want to say I enjoyed the Sunday school lesson this morning. Found out how Brother Aaron got married. His wife had a plan. He didn't have one, but she did. And she put her plan in motion, and it worked. And so during the night, early this morning, I had a dream, and I'm not one of these that has a lot of dreams. Well, I have a lot of dreams, but most of the time there's nothing spiritual about it. And I wouldn't even want to try to interpret a lot of my dreams, but it seemed that in the night, the Lord, in speaking in dreams, directed me this way. And I kind of know where I'm going to start, but I'm not exactly sure where I'm going to finish. But let's go, if you would, to the book of Genesis. And we're going to start with a very familiar verse of Scripture. And some of these things you may have heard me say before. If you have, repetition aids learning, so we will hear them again. So I'd like to ask you to stand, if you're able to stand, with the reading of the Word. And we're going to begin reading, and I want you to, I'm going to quote it, and then I want you to, I'll tell you when I want you to quote it with me. And I must do a disclaimer here. I forgot my reading glasses. They're in the van. And so if you think I'm reading from a different version other than the King James, I'm actually not. It's just I can't quite see what I'm reading. And that's another sign that you're getting old. But I think I can quote this in from memory. Genesis chapter 1, verse number 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Now join with me now. 3, 2, 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Now I'm reading verse 2. And the earth was without form and void. Darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. Thank you. and you might be seated. And I hope the Lord will help me this morning to say something that would be meaningful and helpful. And then I would really like to see the Lord help us in these altars, because that really is one of the most crucial parts of the service. And so, with that having been said, I don't think that I have to spend a lot of time on some things this morning, because some things you already know. But we are living in a day in which skeptics and critics have really challenged the authority of the Bible. And many of them have made this book to be nothing but, if anything, a book of fairy tales and the like. And there are even some now who suggested that really, when we look at Genesis and the accounts of creation, that really the author of Genesis actually borrowed this concept of God from the other religions of that day. And of course, those same ones would deny Mosaic authorship. I do think that there is sufficient evidence that Moses was the author of the first 5 books of the Bible. But some of those would argue that this really, whoever the author was, and most of them would deny Moses, but would suggest that whoever it was simply borrowed ideas of a creation from the other religions of that time. And they will even point to similarities between the various religions from the time frame that this was written. But they make one crucial mistake, and that is their concept of God is entirely different than the concept of God we see right here in Genesis 1:1. In fact, Vernon Yeager, in his book on the Greek gods and goddesses, says that verse 1 of Genesis chapter 1 that we've just read is one of the most profound verses or statements in the history of human literature. And I say that word literature in a very broad sense. But he says, rightly so, that Genesis 1:1, the ancient author of Genesis 1:1, was the first author in the history of religion, and I use that very broadly, to introduce us to a God who is not himself created. Right. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Now, it's interesting to know that in all of the other religions of the world at this time, in every one of those other religions, if you look at them, they all had gods and goddesses. But every one of those gods and goddesses were themselves created. That's why in the Hindu religion, when you see they worship some 300 million plus gods. Can you imagine trying to keep up with that? 300 million plus gods. And sometimes that's why it's very easy, if you will, to, quote, convert a Hindu, because they just add Jesus to the other 300 million. And I know some that have done that. But in their likenesses of their gods and goddesses, you've seen them, the pictures of them, it's a half man, a half monkey, half woman, half elephant, something to that effect. And the reason, the reality is because their gods and goddesses have all in themselves been created. So that means there must be something or somebody out there beyond them. Right. But you see, when we come to the God of the Bible, there is nobody greater than him, because he was the creator of everything. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Everything was created by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. And so that sets the God we worship apart from any other God. Now, Sister Hudson and I are working in Myanmar, where it is 85% Buddhist. Buddhism is a very strange religion. It's a pantheistic, and it's just weird. That's the only way I know to say it. But they will tell you they do not worship a deity. They don't worship a deity. And everywhere you go, pagodas, now it's not just Buddhist too, but every pagoda or Buddhist temple claims to have either one of Buddha's teeth or one of his hairs or a part of his skin, and they're everywhere. But they claim they don't worship a deity, and yet there are idols in every one And you see those people, they are bowing down to them. They are praying to them. They are pouring water over the head of their little god. They're putting flowers. They're bringing food. They're doing everything that denotes worship, and yet they claim that they're not worshiping a deity. But here again, their gods, their idols look like one of my ancestors. I'm serious. And by that I mean because their Buddhas had long ears. And that was the trait of my mother's side of the family, those long ears. But every one of them, they look like a human being. But God said, don't you fashion anything likened unto me. And the reason you're not to do that is because you cannot comprehend how great a God that I See, our God is not a created God. Our God is the creator of everything. Our God is the one who said, let there be, and there was. Now you see, I'm not a Hebrew scholar. Sometimes my English ain't all that great. But in the Hebrew, that word create means to take nothing and make something out of it. And only God can take nothing and make something out of it. Oh, how do you know, preacher? How many of you here are saved today? You remember when your life was nothing, but God took nothing and made something out of it. Come on, preacher, say God took nothing and made something out of it. Sister Hudson and I were transiting through Singapore several years ago, the Garden City. Probably the most beautiful city that I've ever been in. It's against the law that you should go. You can be fined or go to jail for spitting on the pavement. And beautiful, beautiful, beautiful city. We were transiting in layover, so we were out walking behind our hotel, and it was during the Hindu Festival of Lights. There's a big Hindu temple, and I was kind of curious as to what was going on, and Sister Hudson doesn't like to go in those kind of places, but sometimes I do, just kind of get a feel. And so I stood out there and we watched as people were milling in, going in, coming in, going out. And there was this pedestal, and there was this half elephant, half man statue sitting on the top. And these three men, Hindu men, and they were shirtless, and nothing over the waist up, and they had these little fire sticks, and they were dancing around that little idol and beating those fire sticks. And as I stood there and watched that, it suddenly dawned on me. I don't know how to say it, but it's like I had an illumination. And I just heard when God said, don't you make a likeness of me. Don't you dare make an image to me. You're mocking me when you do that. And I thought, how cynical and how pitiful to think that their God can be depicted by such a little creature. But my God is so great and big. He could by his very spoken word create this entire universe. Do you understand? God said, when there was nothing, God said, let there be, and it was. That's how come you can come to a service like this and everything can change instantaneously, because God can speak the word. And when God speaks the word, everything changes. Oh, come on now, say amen. Put your white clothes on, say amen. Oh, God has to say, let there be, and it was. This morning, you like preaching, do you? God said, let there be, and there was. Nobody can compare to him. Now we get down, and I'm jumping ahead to jump back, but we get down in verse 16, and the Bible said he made the stars also. And I use this as a point of reference, okay? So stay with me here. Now, you've heard me say this before, probably. I'm going to say it again. And that is, how many of you ever stepped out at night and looked up in the starry sky? It looks like the stars are so close together that you can just reach out from one and touch another. You ever notice how you can seemingly tiptoe from one star to the next? Now, the average human without light pollution, which we have a lot of here in the United States, is you normally can count approximately 1,200 to 1,500 stars without the aid of a telescope. But those stars that look like they are within touching distance are actually 30 trillion miles apart. 30 trillion miles apart, from one star to the next. Well, I know where I'm going. I'm getting happy already. My brother-in-law, he preaches sometime. He'll start shouting, and we're all sitting there. What's he shouting? He knows what he's getting ready to say, so he starts shouting. We don't know, so we're just sitting there. So I guess I'm going to go ahead and shout. I know where I'm going with this. It never ceases to amaze me.
Yeah.
Now, 30 trillion miles. How do we kind of quantify that and bring it down where we can understand? If you were going the speed of the now decommissioned space shuttle when it was in orbit, 5 miles per second, 18,000 miles per hour. To go 30 trillion miles at 5 miles per second, or 18,000 miles per hour, to go from star A to star B would take you approximately 201,450 years. Going 18,000 miles per hour to get from star A to star B would take you 201,450 years to get from star A to star B. Now, here's why I can shout. The number of stars in the known universe are equivalent now, cosmologists tell us, to the number of grains of sand on every beach around the world. And any two of them are 30 trillion miles apart. You measure, if you can. I'll give you the tape measure, and you measure, if you can. And then, now here's where I shout. The psalmist says that he holds the universe in the span of his hand, and some have suggested is from right here to right there, is where he holds that vast universe. And you tell me there's anything too hard for God? There's anything too hard for God. God looks over at you this morning and says, is there anything too hard for me? Would you look up? That's why the devil always wants you to look down. If you will look up and realize how great God really is. Toward them that fear him. In other words, if you want an idea of how great God's mercy is, you take the tape measure and you measure the universe. Right. And then you get a concept of how great God's mercy really is. I'm getting sidetracked here. Get me back on track here in a minute, Pastor. But in the early 1900s, the world of physics was just totally upended by this guy. I think might have been related to Donald Trump. This guy could not comb his hair. And I voted for Trump. I did. Don't make no doubt about it. I did to vote for him again. But this guy was named Albert Einstein. And he proved mathematically, stay with me now, at this, prior to his time, most scientists believed in the steady state, that the universe was eternal. And we know by the law of causality, which is anything that has a beginning must have a cause, that if the universe didn't have a beginning, then it didn't have to have a cause. And evolutionary thinkers didn't want the universe to have a beginning, because if it had a beginning, it would have had to be God. So they ruled that out. Well, Einstein came along and proved mathematically that time, space, and matter, the realm we live in, the universe had a beginning. Wow, we've known that for years. I mean, I don't have a PhD in physics, and I know that in the beginning God created the heaven and earth. It upset him, it really did, because he knew what it meant. He did. But he predicted, this became known as his general theory of relativity. E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. Now, I don't have time to get into that. Brother Randolph can deal with that tonight. I'm getting sidetracked here a little bit, but I feel like throwing this in here. But are you with me now?
Yeah. Yes.
His mathematical equations prove that if true, his theory was true, that the universe would be in a state of expansion. In 1929 at the Mount Wilson Observatory, Pasadena, California, a man by the name of Dr. Edwin Hubble, heard that name before? Hubble, was looking through his little microscope, or not microscope, telescope, looked up there, and he saw in the universe a red light chip. Whatever that means, I'm not sure. But that proved that the universe was a state of expansion. It's getting bigger. So it's here, while we're here this morning, you come back nights to where it is, like this. It's getting bigger. It's getting bigger. You're looking at straight there. So what? Well, if God's mercy is like the universe, that means it's getting greater and greater. And I never understood what Paul said, where he said, where sin did abound, grace did much more about. Have you ever prayed for somebody that seemed like they got worse, and then they quit praying, they're only getting worse? That's all right. God's mercy is getting greater. It's like God's mercy is always one step of the greatness of the sin, the very God that are fear me. I don't care how lost and wretched, unless they cross that line and won't return. There's still mercy that's greater than the sin that they're involved in right now, and God is still able to deliver. So in other words, I said, don't you know? Yes. Amazingly, all the science indicates that old illiterate, if you will, fisherman Peter was correct. There's going to come a time in which the universe is going to experience heat death. It's going to burn up just like Peter said. And at that point in time, there will be but there will come a day when God's mercy will come to an end. But as long as there's a heaven and a universe, God said, my mercy is going to be there. There is still hope that our lost can be saved. Are you hearing me? Because God's mercy is getting greater, and it's getting greater. I don't know if there's anybody lost here today, but the mercy of God is greater than your sin, and God is able to deliver you. So God, that big. Is anything too hard for that God? We were preaching in Norfolk, Virginia, with Jim Morris. They put us on in a hotel right there on that's actually kind of going to the bay. A little beach here. It's that time of year, nobody was there, so we were out strolling the beach. I reached out and just grabbed a handful of sand. How many thousands, millions of grains of sand? Wow. Yeah. That's why again, God said, look up. The Lord said, look up. Look up. The devil wants you to look down, because if you look up and really get a grasp of all that out there, you're going to look the devil in the eye and say, you ain't even got a chance. You ain't even got a chance. I said, you ain't got a chance. Hallelujah. Let me get back to this kind of God I'm talking about, all right? That's our God. We're not talking about Buddha. We're not talking about Allah. Or as Brother Henry Baker used to say, Ali. We're talking about the God of this book, all right? The God, amen, the God who created everything. Now, the Bible is a lot of uncertainty. We don't need to get into all that. But one thing we know is, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. Now, I'm not a Hebrew scholar, but that phrase, without form and void, it means an empty, barren wasteland, which I think has led some to erroneously conclude that possibly there was a quote pre-chaotic earth. I don't believe that. But in the simple fact of the matter, here is this earth. If you were to look at it, you would have said it is good for nothing. It's an empty, barren wasteland. Good for nothing. Steeped in darkness. Yeah. It's good for nothing. You wouldn't have even bothered with it. But God said, I'm not finished with it yet. You let me get a hold of it, and I can turn this barren, desolate wasteland into a garden. Oh, come on now. Help me. everything changes. Everything changes in this dark, barren wasteland when the Spirit of God began to move. Oh, come on now. Come on now. You hear me right now? I said the Spirit of God began. Come on. You can do it. You can try. You can preach. I'm not saying you shouldn't. But there's nothing you're ever going to do. But you let the Spirit of God get a hold of you.
Oh, yeah.
You can back him into the corner like you did that great scholar C.S. Lewis and said, am I God or not? Oh, come on now. How many of you were ever lost? Amen. You hear me? Now, you notice what's so amazing I love about this? The Bible said, and the Spirit of God began to move upon the face of the waters. Oh, we didn't even know there was water there. It was just an empty, barren wasteland. But now we're starting to see when the Spirit of God begins to move. Amen. He starts identifying things that can be used. Oh, come on now. Help me, Lord. Preach with you. And then did you notice the next thing? And the Spirit of God began to move, and God said, let there be light. And right in the middle of that darkness, it's like somebody flipped on a light. Have you ever noticed when the Spirit of God begins to move, it's like somebody flips on the light. Oh, and the devil said, well, they may pray, but they'll never see it like you do. Oh, no, they won't. I know they won't, but you let the Spirit of God begin to move. You let God turn on the light. I said, you let God turn on the light. And they'll see it just like the Bible said.
Glory to God.
Stand in front of that nice stained glass window. You'll say, wow, this is beautiful. I can talk about it. And the blind man can stand right there. He'll never see it. But you let his eyes be open and you'll see it just like you do. You let the Spirit of God begin to move.
Right, brother.
I know y'all start at 9:30, so you can get out by 11:30, so you can have the first run of the restaurants. All right, okay. I want you to hear me now. So I want you to hear me. You hear me? Amen. This verse, God said that there would be light, has puzzled scholars for generations. Why is it that the light is the first thing? It seemed like maybe something else should have been first, because later on we come down to the sun, moon, stars, but those are sources of light. They're not actually light itself. Why is it that this is so important? Well, in recent years, there's been this problem that has just plagued physicists. What is it that's holding everything together? Now, if you know anything, remember anything from your high school chemistry class, everything is made up of molecules, which are made up of atoms, and the atoms are made up by, let's see, there's a proton, neutron, electron, somebody said a crouton. But everything is made up of things that are not seen. These little atoms that cannot be seen without the aid of advanced microscopes. The writer said the things which are seen are made of things which do not appear. But your body, but what is it? There's something that, what is it that holds that atom together? Now when they split them, you have a nuclear explosion. I'm not understand that either, but they do it. But what is it that's holding those protons, electrons, neutrons, protons, whatever else? What's holding it all together? Because those are the building blocks that make molecules, that make everything else. You're made up of them. You can't see them, but they're there. Everything. But what is it? And just recently, they have come or are coming to the conclusion that what's holding everything together is light. Explain that. It's his job tonight. I'll tell you, if that be the case,
That means that not just is God the Creator. That means He's what's holding it all together. Right. Never said you're going to come apart, you're going to fall apart. Oh, no, I'm not. It's not just God made me, but He's holding me together. No, I'm not going to lose it. I'm not going to fall apart. You know why? Because the Lord is that light. And He's holding me together, and He is sustaining me. Glory to God. Hallelujah. St. Thomas Aquinas said that God, amen, is like the musician on the violin. He's not just a musician, but as long as he is playing, you hear music. But if he ever stops, the music stops. The reason why we're going to make it is God has not stopped playing the music. Amen. It's not only the Creator, He is the sustainer, and He will see us through in this last hour. That's why, amen, there's nothing, are you hearing me? Nothing that's going to separate us. He is holding us together. Amen. He's holding me together. Oh, they like shouting on that. Amen. You hear me? Woo! Last summer, we were preaching the camp meeting there at Rome. I had something happen to me, and I ended up preaching 3 times at the day service at the camp meeting last year at Wasteland. I was the day speaker to the Ralston night. I preached 3 days. When dreams come true. And I told that for the past 2 years had been some of the most trying in my life. I didn't realize at the time what was going on. I'll spare you details, such that my wife came to me several times and said, I'm worried about you. I said, I'm worried about myself. I don't know. I just don't understand. It's like I can't find God. I just went from that to physical problems and even some financial situations. I felt like I was just drowning. I did not. And I didn't know if I was even going to make it. I'm serious. And we were in Myanmar last June. I'm sorry, June year. Yeah, last June. That's right. Yes, June. I was praying one day in Myanmar. The Lord spoke to me in Myanmar in prayer. In the morning He said, I have done unto you as I did unto Job. I have given you into the hand of the wicked one to test you and try you. Only I will not let him have your life. Suddenly, the previous 2 years, all made sense. Everything made sense. Did I feel deliverance? Not 1 ounce that day. But it did give me that faint glimmer of hope. Because I know what happened to Job. We went to got back to Myanmar, headed straight to Verona, Virginia. Preached that camp meeting for Brother Stricker with the Lord will will begin this year. I preached first night, preached second night. People were so complimentary. I felt like I was dying on the inside of me. I felt like I couldn't get one step in front of the other. And I remember that Thursday afternoon there, got sleep in. Sister Hudson had gone somewhere. I was in a hotel room by myself and I was praying. 45 minutes into prayer, it seemed like an absolute agony. I felt like I was smothering. I felt like I was drowning. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I felt like I had a weight on my shoulder. And I'm like, God, how in the world can I keep up with the schedule we got? And I don't even know if I'm saved. Call preacher, hear me now? But after about 45 minutes, the Holy Ghost come down in that hotel room. And the Spirit of the Lord was in the room. The Holy Ghost moved. And I'll simply tell you what He said. He said, I'm bringing you out and I'm turning your captivity. I felt like a columns, I felt like chains fell off my arms. I felt like a cloud rolled back. I felt like a blanket come over me. Lord was just looking, I said, what is that? That's sunshine. I hadn't seen one. I feel the Holy Ghost right now. Glory. I said, I feel the Holy Ghost right now. Are you hearing me? Ooh, I feel the Holy Ghost right now. Thank you. Amen. I'll tell you, I felt such strength come on me until I felt like literally I got the pulpit that night and the next night and a few weeks after that, I was so dumbfounded. I was preaching one night in Kentucky and I remember what I was preaching, thinking, I can't believe I'm preaching like this. Where did this strength come from? Amen. I'll tell you why. Amen. Because there is a God in heaven. Amen. Who is my sustainer. Amen.
Some of you sisters